Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning on our first inaugural GIDEY event. We're so grateful for seeing all of your faces, all of our panelists that are joining us, and we have a couple of people on our Zoom call as well. And I'll go through the list of our registration and also just our event schedule for today. We're going to start with just a public general knowledge of what Tigray Archive is, who they are, what they've done. And then after that, we have Carl Wickens, who will be joining us via Zoom. He's the co-founder, director of World Outside My Shoes. And he'll be able to tell you further details on that as he's discussing all of the hard work that he's done. It starts way back in the Rwandan genocide, and he has so many fruitful information that he has prepared for you guys as well. Aiden Casa, who's joining us live here, she's moderating an amazing panel for today. We have our panelists here joining us live, so that's incredible. And then after that, we will have a justice and accountability panel discussion, like I just mentioned, as they discuss mental health in the diaspora, social media impacts, and as I just mentioned, accountability for all of the atrocities that have happened worldwide. After that, we'll have a brief Q&A session before we move on to our exhibit. Obviously, you guys have seen the art that's been laid out on each side of you. We have art that's been displayed from Tigray Art Collective and several other archives as well. And we do have a visual at the end. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. In the meantime, before we begin our schedule for the day, we do want to start with a 1-minute moment of silence just to commemorate all of the genocides and all of the atrocities that have taken place. We'll light it, we'll have a moment of silence for 1 minute, and then we're gonna be able to start with our program for the day. So once again, thank you guys so much for joining us. We're very, very grateful. And cheers to GIDEY's inaugural first event. If you guys could just give a round of applause to our founder. And we will go ahead. Yes. And if you guys just don't mind getting up with me for a second, just to do our moment of silence. And as we begin for our program today, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start our program today with just a brief introduction of Tigray Archive and all of the great work that they've been able to do within the space of what's been happening in the past few years. Tigray Archive, born in the memory of Tagaru, who lost their lives early on in the war in 2020, serves as a very crucial part in our community, especially to preserve history. I feel like that's one of the crucial parts of what Tigray Archive does, but also just to bring us in spaces like this where we can have open discussions and just freely discuss the information and the lack of information and the distribution of information within our community, and then to break the echo chamber of our own community as well. So I'm gonna bring Faven Kiros onto our screen here. She's gonna discuss with you guys further as to what Tigray Archive is and what her role is as well. So if you guys can give her a round of applause, and Ahadu will bring her up on the Zoom call for her as well.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Faven Kiros, and I'm part of Tigray Archive. I could not be here with you today, but I'm honored to connect with you virtually for this significant event. I would like to first thank our panelists, our guests, the hosts, and the participants for taking the time off to join us here today for this important cause. And I would also like to begin with honoring victims of genocide, those who lost their lives to genocide, their families, and those who survived. On November 4th, 2020, we witnessed a tragedy in Ethiopia unfold, what many at the time have called the deadliest war in the 21st century. I vividly remember, excuse me, the overwhelming sense of helplessness I felt, many of us felt, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, rape being used as a weapon of war, hundreds of thousands of people starving, homes being destroyed, schools, businesses, tens of thousands of people being forced out of their homes. We were witnessing a genocide happening to our families in Tigray, but the world ignored it. I remember thinking about them every moment, how much pain they must have been in and how much suffering they are enduring. I remember being glued to my phone, being up day and night to bring attention about what was happening. But it seemed that as if our concerns weren't being heard or taken seriously. Born out of these experiences in the Ethiopian conflict, Tigray Archive was founded in December 2020 by Marek Tewolde as an independent online resource dedicated to raising global awareness on the genocide of Tigray. Our website provides easily accessible and well-referenced information for the general public, for students and researchers, and we share these resources to help more people learn about what happened in Tigray and to honor the memory of the countless lives we lost. Our mission at Tigray Archive is to amplify the voices of those affected by the genocide. We want to preserve their stories, and we are dedicated to contribute to preventing genocide from happening again. We are driven by the principles of justice and transparency, and we strive to create a world where everyone can live in peace, free from persecution. Our vision is to be a source of hope for a future where human rights are upheld for all. As we know, the world said never again many times, yet despite the world's promise, it has been disheartening to see genocides continue to happen globally. Genocide is a serious threat that can happen anywhere and impact anyone. Gregory Stanton broke the process of genocide down into 10 stages that follow a pattern that is predictable but not inevitable. According to Stanton, the most severe atrocities happen later. This means that early action could prevent genocide. And this is the hope we hold with GIDEY. GIDEY is a Tigrinya word that means my part. It means to encourage everyone to play a role in taking action against injustice. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to move mountains. Small actions we take consistently can have a major impact. And with GIDEY, we want to inspire collective action, foster solidarity, and work together towards a future where no community has to face the horrors of genocide. We launched GIDEY on this day last year in 2022, and our goal with this event is to create a platform that brings everyone together, from affected communities to survivors, experts, and the wider public. The event is open to everyone, and we care that you participate. Our primary objective is to educate the public about genocide, understand early signs, the consequences, and what we can all do to help prevent it. In today's event, we acknowledge each of you as heroes for showing up and caring. A hero call embodies a real life superhero who steps forward to respond to crises, injustices, and protect the vulnerable. Today, you are all heroes for being here, demonstrating a strong sense of responsibility and selflessness to make a positive impact on your community and beyond. I hope this event will inspire you to continue embodying the spirit of a hero on call. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being here.
That was a great introduction. Once again, another round of applause for Faven Kiros, who is the PR Public Relations Manager at Tigray Archive. As she said, and I'll reiterate, you guys are all heroes for joining us here today. Hero on Call, the first inaugural GIDEY event. We have so much in store for you guys. Our next guest, who's also joining us via Zoom, is a guy named by the Carl Wilkins. He's co-founder as well as director at World Outside My Shoes, who has dedicated his entire career to genocide prevention, working tirelessly to his career in genocide prevention through his commitment, his contribution significantly on ongoing discourse, as well as the initiatives that are aimed at preventing the recurrence of such heinous crimes in the present day. He will be joining us via Zoom, as I mentioned.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to the whole team there for the Tigray Archives team and for everybody who's brought this event together. I really appreciated my conversations with Mareg in preparation, and I really too I wanted to be there. I so appreciate your remarks, Fevin, as you're setting up the introduction there. There's nothing like being there in person, but we're happy that at least we can join you virtually. I just want to make sure that I'm coming through okay and you're seeing everything okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, I often struggle when I try to figure out how to talk about this horrendous 100 days back in 1994, the genocide against the Tutsi. And recently, I just say, when I talk about Rwanda, we have to focus on a bigger picture. While today we're going to zoom in on the 1994 genocide, I wanted to begin our conversation just with the incredible journey that Rwanda has been on, the hope that Rwanda continues to give me every time I visit the country. Their innovation in terms of things like gender equality, and people even in Starbucks, they know about Rwandan coffee, and especially the resilience and their restorative approach to life. Super inspiring. It's things that you would have thought would have been impossible, before. But the people, as we're celebrating, well, I don't know, honoring, maybe celebrating isn't the right word, but I mean, we're calling on people on call. As I heard you say that every one of you is a hero for being there, I can easily imagine some of you saying, well, this was, I just came, this is nothing heroic about this. But showing up is always the beginning, to simply show up. And we often think that, what can I do? And I love the name Getting My Part, tiny part. We're not asking people to save the world. We're just show up. And what is our part? For my wife and I, we showed up in Rwanda in 1994. You can see how young our family was at that time, our 3 small children. We were there with the Adventist Development Relief Agency, a humanitarian arm of the Adventist Church. We were building schools, partnering with the people of Rwanda, just trying to make life better. And honestly, for us too, it was a wonderful opportunity. It was a great place to raise our children. We were there for 4 years before this horrific event, and I won't go into a lot of the details of the background or the history, but just kind of in summary, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story, but that night on April 6, 1994, when the president's plane is shot down, people often think, oh, well, the genocide, started that night. Well, a coup was launched that night. A relatively small group of men and women launched a coup, an illegal seizure of power, and the first item on their agenda was genocide. So Thursday, they killed the prime minister. She should have stepped in, been able to take over when the president was killed, but she wasn't part of the extremist group. She wouldn't go along with this genocide ideology. We had 2,500 UN troops there. There's so many tragic, just unbelievable parts of this story. But the fact that there were enough UN soldiers there to stop it is just one of the most difficult to deal with and to talk about. 10 of those soldiers who were part of the team who is supposed to be guarding the prime minister will be killed. They'll be killed. Their bodies will be mutilated, and the message will go out to all of the UN, to all of the foreigners, the international community: get out of Rwanda. This genocide that they have planned for some years is going to be launched. And I started traveling to schools probably about 19 years ago, speaking about these stories there, wondering, how do you start a conversation about genocide? And I think one of the most effective places or ways I found for it to begin is to look inside ourselves. You see, I don't want to kill anybody or anything, but I often think that, if I just didn't have to deal with this person, my world would be better without, and you fill in the blank. That kind of exclusive problem solving, not we're going to solve the problem by bringing more people in, but we think we're going to solve the problem by excluding people. That's where the roots are, which is going to be a temporary method at best, and it's going to be genocide at worst. Now, one of the things I also think is really important for us to understand as we look at this horrific tragedy. I mean, I put some pictures of the progress and the beauty of Rwanda, but that is all a tribute to the courage and strength of the people who survived. And yeah, I won't go farther into that, but how in the world, do you get to a place like this? How did kind, I'll use this for another word, how did kind and generous people become murderers? And then of course the question is, can they ever be trusted again? We're gonna dig into this first part of how, just a little bit of background, how kind and ordinary people can become instruments in the hands of extremists to commit something like genocide. Now, like I said, I won't go deep in the history, but we'll go back as far as the late 1800s with the Germans in Rwanda. And the colonial influence is going to be a key in this whole story, which we could spend our whole time and more talking about that. But after World War I, things are taken away from Germany. Belgium is given, that's even crazy for me to say given, but Belgium is the new colonial power at that time. And in 1962, independence will come. Now, there has been discrimination, the Belgians favoring the minority over the majority in terms of jobs and education and things like that. And that discrimination is gonna be a part of the disease at the roots of the new Rwanda, the independent country. And instead of saying we are a country of one people, the message will start going out about Hutu power, those who were discriminated against, and there'll be much violence, and many people, a typical ID card that has the ethnicity right at the top, on this one in particular, the word Hutu is crossed out, and the word Tutsi remains here for this person, and it's like Twa is crossed out, naturalized is crossed out, and anybody with a Tutsi ID card will be marked for extermination, marked as part of the enemy. We're going to have a short Q&A time. I hope afterwards we'll see how our time allows, and we may dig in a little deeper into history. But back to our story at our home during this time, we heard the explosion of the plane crash Wednesday night. Thursday night, a gang comes to our house. Our neighbor ladies tell us the next morning they came to kill us. Now, we didn't even know they were there. We never even knew they arrived. I always think it's really important for people to understand, before my wife and I made the decision that I would stay and she would take our kids to safety, these neighbor ladies courageously stood in front of our gate and said no to this gang of militia. We talk about heroes and it can mean many different things. In this case, it meant maybe 5-10 minutes of action on the part of these neighbor ladies standing up for us and basically telling stories about our kids playing with their kids, basically trying to get the this gang of killers, what I would say, out of their downstairs brain, their fight flight part, up to that prefrontal cortex, where you can think about empathy and compassion and even logic. It's so important. As we look at so many conflicts, we realize we are so often trapped in our downstairs brain, and we need voices like these ladies to remind us of our better selves, our better versions, what really is at the foundation of peace is relationships. And these ladies are talking about our kids playing with their kids. We're talking about working together as a community on whenever challenges come in the community. And so I think it's, sometimes we think, how could I be a hero in a situation? And sometimes it's just standing up for 1 minute. It starts with relationships, and it also starts with understanding that our presence is incredibly powerful. And for our family, the presence of these neighbor ladies was so crucial to our survival. On Thursday night, the second night after the plane shot down on Wednesday night. On Thursday, the message is going to go out from the American Embassy that we're not going to evacuate. There's no time. The Rwandan Patriotic Front, many of the Tutsi minority people who had fled at the time of independence, grown up outside the country, eventually, after trying to come back peacefully for years, after almost 30 years, they formed a military group called the Rwandan Patriotic Front. And the embassy was telling us on Thursday, no, we're not going to leave. They're saying the Rwandan Patriotic Front, led by General Kagame, will take over the city, restore order. Really? By Friday, they realized that's not going to happen. And the message was coming out of Washington, D.C. Everybody's got to leave. Everybody is evacuating. Bring your family to the already assembly points we've already identified, and we're going to evacuate. But don't bring any, oh man, I hate to even say these words. Don't bring any Rwandans. Now, here's my mom and dad were actually visiting at the time. Hey, and there's Teresa and I and our 3 young children. But I love this drawing here too. These little sketches I'm showing you, they're from, if you'd like the little more longer version of the story on YouTube, there's a film called I'm Not Leaving. And you can find these drawings are from that film. That's what we send to schools before I come and speak, to give some background. But I love this picture because the young lady who lived and worked in our home, young man who came in the evening as the watchman, they both had Tutsi ID cards. They were both marked for extermination. And as you can see in this picture, though, this drawing, they're part of our family. So this is another crucial part to sustainable peace, is seeing everybody as family, a human race, human family. And boy, I always tell people, when somebody like this young lady who lived and worked in our home and loved on our kids, when somebody loves on your kids, that's like fast track to becoming family. So when the American Embassy is giving us the message, we're all leaving, but you can't bring any Rwandans, we're like, how can we leave part of our family here to be killed? And so that's when Teresa and I will make the decision on Friday that, they treat us foreigners with so much kindness. They give us so much privilege. Maybe we can use that privilege to at least help these 2 people in our home. So my mom and dad and Teresa will take the children to safety, and I'll stay, really not knowing that more than 1 million people are going to be killed in the next 100 days. I'm not even sure we knew at that point that the UN was planning on withdrawing they wanted to withdraw all of their 2,500 soldiers. Fortunately, General Dallaire, the Canadian commander, Henry Adioho, his assistant from Ghana, they said, no, we cannot, abandon this country. And a small group of UN soldiers will stay, and they will save thousands of lives, demonstrating that had the whole 2,500 been kept there, they could have stopped the genocide. So Teresa and the kids will go to safety. We'll say goodbye. I'll see you probably in 2 weeks or so, but but you know, I'm going to stay and try to help these two people in our home. Well, they will survive, those two people. I'll have a pastor and his wife, a Rwandan pastor, Soraya, and his wife come and stay with me too. And one morning, after about 3 weeks, I remember having a conversation with Pastor Soraya. We're sitting there next to the toaster there in the dining room. And I'm like, Pastor, I'm so glad, you know, we're all still alive, but there's got to be more. What else can we do? And he'll make this statement that will just stay with me for the rest of the genocide, for the rest of my life. He'll say, Carl, if you're gonna do anything outside of our house, anything that you hope to succeed, you've got to build a relationship with the people in power. Now, I've already told you, the people in power are the people who are planning and executing the genocide. It seems like very, very different advice from a pastor, huh? And yet I'll build a relationship with Colonel Renzaho, who is currently in prison for his role in the genocide. He'll give me a travel permit. I will work together with Rwandan colleagues I've already been working together with, you know, building schools and operating clinics. Das, and he was in charge of our metal shop, you know, building window frames for the schools and door frames and stuff. Gasikwa was a project supervisor in that. And of course, I've mentioned Pastor and Mrs. Soraya, who were there. You know, anytime people want to talk about white savior or something, I'm like, boy, I was not in charge. I was not a savior in this situation. I was part of a team, you know, for strategy and to know what to do. Pastor Soraya was the one who really helped us understand what next, you know, build a relationship with people in power. We get to a roadblock, man, it's my colleagues Dawson and Gasikwa who will navigate us through the city and through the roadblock. They'll know about the connections, the relationships. We started bringing food and water to groups of orphans. Damas and his wife Beatrice, they'll be the ones who will tell us, what do we need to do at the orphanage? You know, how can we help? They had more than 80 kids at the beginning. By the time it's over, they'll have more than 400 children. And I'd like to just kind of wrap up my comments, and if we have time for questions, happy for that, with just a little bit of a story of this orphanage. Still there today, although the orphanages have been closed in Rwanda. There's a school here, there's an after-school program, but there at the orphanage in the team with Damas and his wife Beatrice. First, let me start with Damas and Beatrice. Okay, Damas is 34 years old at the time. Tragically, we lost Damas last year, kidney failure. He passed away last June. Incredible man, a legacy that will live on for I know for generations. You know, during the genocide, Damas, this 34-year young man, is opening his place for children. Parents are afraid it's your first thought, your first priority. How can we protect our children? And they would come to his orphanage. I remember visiting several years after the genocide, and they had built a brick wall kind of around their campus. I'm like, wow, Damas, I bet you wish you had that brick wall during the genocide, huh? You just had a pencil hedge, you know, during that time. And he goes, oh, no. The brick wall would have made it much more difficult for the children to get in. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm thinking about keeping the enemy out. He's thinking about opening the doors for the children to come in. Damas, during these horrible 3 months of killing, he'll be pleading with his neighbors for the better version of themselves. This is not who you are. We don't betray each other. This is not our legacy. This is not our heritage of our country. This is not what we want for our children. And after the genocide, he once again will be pleading with people about revenge. No, this is not what we want. This is not who you are. He would be spending his life calling us to the better versions of ourselves. Also, Beatrice, unfortunately, will have to be hiding during this time because she's of the minority. He'll have an ID card of the majority. She'll have an ID card of the minority. This is the story. I didn't quite finish on the history part. This is not a story of one group who hates another group. This is a story of political manipulation. You see, the Hutu and the Tutsi, the majority and the minority, they married each other all the time. That's not unusual at all in Rwanda. You speak the same language, you go to church together, you drink beer together, you do business together. This is not a story of one group who hates another. It's a group of political manipulation, and it's a story of people who have lived in fear. They've had war for several years, war driving us to our downstairs brain, the amygdala. It's so easy to get into that fight flight mode. And so Beatrice will need to be hiding during this time. But Beatrice will tell me about stories about a lady who was the nurse at the orphanage named Tryphene. When I first met Tryphene, I was just blown away by this. She had a presence about her. She had a peace and a calm in the midst of chaos. I mean, kids were dying from diarrhea. They just needed water to clean things, water to drink, a little bit of medicine. And I would show up with a box of medicine, and Tryphene, the nurse, would almost drop to her knees, and she would use words like angel for me, And I'm like, no, Tryphene, you are the angel here in this story. And I show up one day and I have some medicine that I got from the Red Cross. And I'm like, ooh, hey, Tryphene, qu'est-ce qui passe? French was the language at the time. And I'm like, where's Tryphene? What's happened? And nobody will answer. And finally, somehow the message gets through that she's gone. She's dead. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know who to say. I find out probably 10 years later that Tryphene was called on often by the killing squads to give first aid to their colleagues who were getting wounded and injured in their work of genocide. And I was just blown away thinking to myself, how could Tryphene, clean and disinfect the wounds of these people who are killing, who have made the children? She's trying to comfort them at night. Kids wake up screaming with nightmares. They've seen the horrors and atrocities that have happened to their parents, and she's trying to calm them. And at the same time, she's giving medical treatment to the ones who have caused, who are the instruments of genocide. And I sometimes think, she could have been forced, but then I think, Tryphene, she saw people differently. She saw people like they were family. She saw them like they were family. And this one day at the end, they forced her into a Land Rover. They took her away, and nobody ever saw her again. And I think to myself, wow, how can I see people like Tryphene? How can I live a life? Talk about a hero. How could I do that? Beatrice told me just a few years ago, every morning Tryphene would, because the ladies were sleeping together in a little hiding place, and then Tryphene would go out and work with the kids during the day. Every morning, she says, Tryphene would be picking among her clothes in the little case there, trying to find the cleanest, the best dress, knowing that day she might be killed. And I'm still just not just blown away, but I'm still so inspired by Tryphene. I'm inspired by Damas and his wife Beatrice. I just think to myself, how can people survive in these horrific situations? And yet somehow, often for our children, for others, we survive with that focus for others. The genocide will be ended by the Rwandan Patriotic Front. They will liberate Rwanda, and they will have then the unimaginable task of rebuilding this country. But I want to just give ending with one little tiny short quick story. It's 2019. I'm in Rwanda with a group of students from Chicago who've been studying peace, and we're speaking with both survivors and perpetrators in a reconciliation village. And one of the students from Chicago says to the ladies there, one of the kids says to the ladies, "What about God?" And many of us ask ourselves questions of whatever religious persuasion, what about God in this situation? And the lady said to this young man from Chicago, she said, well, at the beginning, we kind of thought God forgot us. I mean, Rwanda was a nation where 80% of the people were in church most weekends, okay? Whatever, Catholic, Protestant, small group, Muslim. She says, we thought God forgot us. And then we thought, as it got worse, God doesn't even care about us, doesn't like us. And it got worse, and we thought, well, we don't like God, you know? And she kind of quit there for a moment. And the student said, but then what? And she goes, then we got really lonely, and we decided to try God again. Now, I understand, I can't see you, who I'm speaking to today, but I can pretty much imagine there's somebody in the group that the word God is a trigger and makes you angry. And I can understand that. I can, the failure of organized religion and stuff in Rwanda, I hear you. And so sometimes I'm like, let's not talk about God. Let's talk about love. And one of the things that inspires me to talk about love, you know, not where was God in the genocide, but where was love in the genocide? And as we talked with these ladies, they said something that just really, it seems so counterintuitive at first. You know, they said it's our pain that drives us deeper into love. And I'm thinking of Trifine, and I'm thinking of Mrs. Raya, I'm thinking of all of the people, Beatrice and Damas, and I'm like, our pain can drive us into bitterness and anger. And where does that lead us? But really, somehow, we've got these people, these heroes among us, who can still see family in the midst of these horrors and atrocities, and they can still somehow, I still struggle with it. I struggle with my anger and my bitterness, but I'm so inspired by the stories of the people in Rwanda, for me particularly, what resilience looks like to them, and how from their pain and their anguish, they have managed to go deeper into love. I mean, not everybody, not a perfect story, but again and again and again, I'm struck when I visit how there is something more powerful. I know it sounds trite, it sounds cliche, something more powerful than hate and bitterness and revenge. And that's kind of where I can take a deep breath and say, that's my hope, is loving myself and loving my neighbor. I think that's how I'm going to wrap it this morning. I don't know if I've left us any time for any questions, but I really appreciate this event, and I appreciate all of you coming together to have these conversations from so many different organizations, and I hope we can meet one day face to face.
Again, thank you so much, Carl Wilkins. I am going to open the floor just for about like 2 to 3 questions, maybe. If you guys need some time to think of your question, I can go ahead and start it off for you guys with a question. As you mentioned, Carl, your work in recent years has done with universities and speaking at universities. So that question just goes to, how important do you feel education is and what role it plays in preventing mass atrocities and having that into play as well? How do you feel like you've contributed to that aspect as well?
Well, I feel super fortunate to work with the teachers that I work with and students, student leader groups. That's the lion's share of my work. In 2004, a documentary came out called Ghost of Rwanda about the Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi. And teachers, since I was there, I was one of the people interviewed in that documentary. So when teachers saw me there, this is 10 years after the genocide, so it's fresh. They don't have many resources. So they grabbed this frontline PBS documentary. You can actually still find it on YouTube, Ghost of Rwanda, and they start using it in their classrooms. And then they said, well, would you come and speak to our students? So I started coming, traveling 2 or 3 days, coming to schools around the country, 2 or 3 days a month for about 4 years. And then it was the genocide in Darfur, there in the Sudan, that really pushed me to leave my job and start traveling to schools full time. And that's when my wife and I formed our little nonprofit called World Outside My Shoes. And, there's all kinds of forms of education, but stories are really what stick. If you want something to stick, you wrap it in a story. And so story-based, experiential-based education, that's what we're working together with teachers, often English, as well as, of course, history, social studies, government, and even human rights when you get more specific, Holocaust and genocide. But that opportunity, I've seen it again and again, these opportunities to explore these horrific stories and understand how they could have been prevented, and try to dig into the stories of the individuals who stood up against the current, the people, like our neighbor ladies, who in that few moments, they just stood up for somebody else. Typically, hopefully, we're not in a situation where we have to stand up for somebody in life or death, but we definitely can stand up for somebody in a moment of disrespect, and so this whole idea of not only being present and standing up for somebody, building relationships, but then how do you repair harm? That's become a big part of our conversations these days too in Rwanda. And I know for the people in the middle of harm right now, don't talk to me about repairing it. And I totally get that. And I don't want to push any of that. But we do, no, not but, and for many of us, it's so important right in the middle of atrocities to be documenting. That's the heroic work of many people, documenting what's happening in the atrocities right now, because we do need to bring justice. We need our best. Justice is such a crucial part of peace, but we're finding in Rwanda a restorative justice. A punitive justice doesn't go far enough to break the cycle of violence. So yeah, I'm a big believer in the power of education, being able to see the world through a different lens, hear the stories, especially of the people who've been there. Like, your archive, I'm sure, is full of those stories. That's where I think we can begin to really shift the way we think about ourselves and our potential to make a difference, and the way we can build and maintain peace.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? I'll give it right up to you.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to thank you and appreciate you that you exemplifies that what humans should be, because you are here to tell us the story, the truth of Rwanda genocide, and bring it to life. So I appreciate you on that. On your presentation, you talk about the UN peacekeepers in Rwanda. Some of them left, and the ones that who stay save lives. So history tells us again and again, the UN is failing to protect the global citizens around the world, like recently in Tigray. Because the Tigray genocide was waged by Ethiopia and Eritrea, there was several meetings that was held at the UN, but the UN failed to act, and over 1 million innocent people lost their life. So in your opinion, what do you think the global citizens should do that the UN structure to be changed, so the UN can be a savior of the people, not the one that who is just watching people dying around the world? Thank you.
Wow. I wish I had an easy answer for that question. I have to stop and think about what I can do to change in my thinking. I think is one of the challenges for me with the UN. I mean, we could go and examine their policy and protocol. We could talk about how years ago we were so excited. Many of us in the activist community were excited about the responsibility to protect that was passed in the UN, and then we've seen how that has been so ineffective over the years. And it's easy to see failure after failure after failure. In 2017, the Rwandan government, at the time of the commemoration of the genocide, they were planning an event at the UN, and I was privileged to be invited by them to come and speak at that commemoration. But part of me didn't want to set foot in the UN. I was so angry at the betrayal and all of the resources that seemed to be wasted, and it just in so many ways seemed to be not even a joke. A joke is too light of a word. It seemed to be obscene. The failures and the atrocities right in front, of the international community, in front of the UN. And as I wrestled, honored by the invitation by the Rwandan government, frustrated with my anger at the UN, I realized, okay, 2017, Carl, that's 23 years after the genocide. For 23 years, you have been defining the UN by their failures. You know, have a look. Have a look at some of the founders at this time. Have a look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You know, have a look at someone like Eleanor Roosevelt, for example, talking about her talking with the custodial staff at the UN at the time. Does this Universal Declaration make sense to you? You know, an ordinary, you know, a person working here in the custodial department at the UN, and just really beginning to see the UN as more than their failures. Now, here's the problem, because as soon as somebody says to me, see, look for the good, okay? I think if I look for the good, look for the work, say, the UN has done in eradicating polio. I'm like, okay, fine, but, and it's like, if I look for the good, I think I'm diminishing the failure, or I'm not holding them responsibility for all of their failures. And I recognize to myself, you know what? If I constantly define the UN only by their failures, not by their work in gender equality or in education, you know, UNICEF or different projects or, you know, initiatives of the UN. If I only define them by their failures, I'm going to be trapped in my downstairs brain when I think of the UN. And in my downstairs brain, I don't have access to that prefrontal, you know, the upstairs, the logic, the creativity, the empathy. And so looking for the good does not diminish the evil in a situation. It helps me to get in a better place where I can be part of positive change, part of change of policy and protocol and procedure. So my strategy in not just the UN, which is a really tough one still for me, because while I went and I appreciated the opportunity that I was there, and it was a defining moment for me to not simply define the UN by their failures, but try to look for the good. I mean, I remember an ambassador from Grenada who was there in 2017, and her heart of compassion for the people of Rwanda. And I'm like, I don't think about people like that when I think about the UN. And other representatives came after the main meeting to the Rwanda mission for more conversations. And I'm like, there are humans in this building. I mean, I know that might sound kind of obvious, but when I only define them by their failures, it's hard to see humans there. It's more to see others, not myself, not us, not we. I don't want to be part of a we, of a failing organization. But in looking for the good, I think I have a better chance of being part of changing that organization. And some of the things, you know, that I've talked about in the presentation, relationships, seeing each other as family, recognizing we are all one race, a human race. Those then might be possible to act on when I start trying to find the good, even in some of the, I would say, worst situations. Boy, I hope that makes some sense. I'd love to have a longer conversation on that.
Thank you again. We have one last question, and then we're going to move on to our next scheduled programming.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carl. My name is George. I'm from South Sudan, the Nuer by tribes. So I got a question related to that, because you went through Rwanda genocide. You know, you were there and experienced it. When the genocide or the incident happened in Juba, 2013, killing Nuer door to door, and asking them whether they speak Dinka or they don't. If they do not speak Dinka, they are the, you know, that's a cart for killing, you know, children and women and everybody. So when that South Sudan 2013 door-to-door killing happened, and when you heard it, based on your experience in Rwanda, and now Tigray, of course, did you remember and you see more broad picture of what is really happening in South Sudan, similar to what happened in Rwanda and Tigray? When the Nuer people were killed in 2000, on December 15, 2013, door to door, based on their ethnicity, and they were asked if they speak Dinka. If you don't, because Nuer identify themselves, they can't hide. They say, no, I'm a Nuer, and then you are done, you are being killed. you know, it's another ID card, you know, for being, you know, identified as a, yeah. Did it just remind you of what happened in Rwanda in 1994, and that similarity that you see, or and in Tigray, of course, but that may be a little bit be asked by somebody else. So that's my question, because nobody talk about it, because we knew it, didn't even talk about it, but now here we are in this forum. So that's my question. If there's something that sounds similar, like what you experienced in Rwanda.
Yeah, for sure. I have to confess, you know, with PTSD and all of the different trauma, and I didn't go through near the horrors that many of you have gone through and people who've survived have gone through. I am cautious about the news. I used to think, you know, I've got to be up to date on everything. I need to know about every atrocity and all of the crimes that are happening around the world. And I think that's the pathway to burnout. And so I'm just being really open with you right now. Yes, definitely reminded of that pattern. And you see it again and again as neighbors turn on neighbors, and we use such superficial things to divide and define one another, and not our shared humanity. I think, though, what I would like to, so I mean, to your question of yes, reminders all over the place, and you know, and even it doesn't matter which conflict I look at, I see the children and I see what's happening to the children, and that, you know, really troubles me for the future, in terms of how can we build sustainable peace on trauma after trauma after trauma. And then I see leadership that is really just more interested in themselves and staying in power than in the children, in the families, in the peace, sustainable peace for the region. And it's easy to kind of get cynical and hopeless. But I'm on a journey away from cynicism. I do not want to be cynical. I don't want to be fooled. I don't want to be, you know, ignorant, bury my head in the sand. So how do I move in this kind of continuum from cynicism towards hope, towards believing in people, towards trusting people again? And those are kind of like baby steps for me. And I would love to talk about neuroplasticity and how we can form new pathways in our brain when we see all of these things that are just like repeating it again and again. And then we say, you know, well, never again is a pretty meaningless phrase. And I'm like, no, don't say that, because we don't know how many times we have prevented genocide because it didn't happen. And so this idea of kind of, and I'm sorry if I'm hijacking your question, and this is not where you were going, but it's what triggered in my mind this sense of hopelessness that can overwhelm us as we see these atrocities after atrocity. And I've kind of built a foundation stone in my life that says, if I am more involved, if more of my life is about atrocities and injustice than it is about identifying beauty and value and good, I'm on a pathway to burnout. Now, that doesn't mean that I ignore the atrocities. Absolutely not. But it does mean what I was kind of clumsily saying a few minutes ago, that I'm cautious and mindful of how much time I spend and how deep I go in certain stories to try to maintain my own mental health and my own ability to be available for people, to be present, to show up and stuff, if I don't take care of myself. And part of that taking care of myself is this idea of looking for the good and the beauty. And I'm not just saying in atrocities, because sometimes it's just too fresh. You don't talk to me about looking for the good in atrocities, but just look for the beauty of someone like Trifine, who's in the middle of a genocide, and she's comforting children, and she's also bandaging and disinfecting those who are doing the harm. Or look at the sunset, or look at some time at the ocean, or just spend some time with your grandkids, where the beauty is. I take so many pictures on my phone. I don't post much on social media, and I probably never show people most of it. But in the moment I'm taking the picture, I'm writing something beautiful in my brain of value. And I've got to nourish and care for myself in those ways so that I can be creative and courageous in the times like you described in 2013. But I hope I didn't hijack your question, but I so appreciate these stories need to be brought forward. They need to be told, and I don't want anyone to hear me say anything different than that. And so I'm grateful for you bringing forward those stories. And then we need to decide, what are we going to do? We can't bury our head. So how can we mindfully navigate our way through those stories? And part of that mindful navigation is coming alongside the people who have experienced it, like yourself.
And we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to you, Carl Wickens. Such a powerful keynote address, and I'm sure everybody in this room can agree with me, for sharing your experiences, your insights on everything regarding genocide prevention. Your dedication to building the connections within the communities that you have is admirable, and I'm sure we have something to take away from your speech as well. So let us carry forward the lessons that we've learned here today, fostering awareness, protecting measures for the world free from such genocide. So if you guys could just give a round of applause for our keynote speaker this afternoon.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much. And happy to continue the conversation by email or any other way we could continue it. And thank you for the work. And I wish you all the best as the day continues to unfold. I wish I was there with you, but thank you for the opportunity, and courage to our families who are in the middle of it right now as we speak. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.